Following video contains audio and visual that may be upsetting for those under the age of 20. Regardless, it is still upsetting, and caution is advised. This was the 20th century. Warning, the following audio, video contains sounds and visuals from World War II. Mature, historical, 18-plus content ahead. Viewer discretion is advised.
From the first flight of the German Luftwaffe to the takeoff of the Enola Gay for Hiroshima, World War II plunged millions and millions of people into a near bottomless pit of barbarism and chaos. Radio was there as reason gave way to madness and weapons replaced words. 40 years later, it is still a heart-wrenching witness to history. Here then, as recorded by radio, are some of the sounds and voices of a world at war.
To Germany, I realized vividly how Herr Hitler feels that he must champion other Germans. He told me privately, and last night he repeated publicly, that after this Sudeten German question is settled, that is the end of Germany's territorial claims in Europe.
We interrupt this broadcast to bring you a special news bulletin. Moscow, Germany, and Russia today signed a non-aggression pact. They have agreed that neither country would declare war against one another, and that neither one would come to the aid of a third party in case either nation was attacked.
Before we go any further, I just want it to be on record that I do not support the Nazi Party's ideology. I strongly am against everything that Hitler stood for. If anything, I am absolutely appalled and repulsed by the absolute grotesque and inhumane nature that was the Nazi Party. 6 million Jews and other people did not need to die simply because of their religion, race, or background. It's unacceptable. To the families and those who have relatives that were murdered at the concentration camps in Auschwitz and Dachau, I send my sincerest apologies for your loss. We live in an imperfect world with imperfect people, but that is no excuse at all for the atrocities committed by the Nazi Party. It would be an incredible disservice to those who lost their lives at the concentration camps to say that this is a tragedy that should never have happened to begin with and should never happen again. In honor of the millions that were slaughtered in cold blood during World War II in Europe, your memory lives on, your legacy lives on. People like Anne Frank. When the concentration camps were liberated and all of the remaining Nazi documents and equipment were seized by the U.S., it is notable that one of the unique pieces of technology that was brought back to the States was magnetic tape recording technology. But we've talked about the really difficult things, such as World War II. I wanted to move on to a more lighthearted note. We're going to be discussing and celebrating popular children's radio programming from the 1940s. One of my grandpa's all-time favorite radio programs was The Lone Ranger. With a mighty hi-yo silver, away! It became one of the most iconic parts of 20th century radio, and I absolutely love listening to the radio version of this as well as the television series of The Lone Ranger. It's a classic. This is one of the very rare artifacts that I retrieved from my grandpa's house after he passed away. This is his original copy of The Lone Ranger on VHS. Unlike the radio program, this version is made for television starring Clayton Moore, and the leading role is the Lone Ranger. The following controversial piece of physical media that I am about to show you might get my channel canceled, and my intention is not to be divisive or racist, but this is my grandpa's 1946 copy of Walt Disney's soundtrack to Song of the South. This is a love letter and a celebration of the culture and things that were happening in the 40s, and I would be lying if I gave you a whitewashed version of that story, but my grandpa loved Song of the South. He loved the song Zippity Doo Dah, famously sung by James Baskett as Uncle Remus, and when I hear it, I think of him. Given that this channel is all about nostalgia and your inner child, it is perfectly fitting that one of my grandpa's favorite songs was Forever Young by Rod Stewart from his 1989 album Out of Order. This is another item I retrieved from his house. This is the Pinocchio soundtrack. As we now transition coming out of the 1940s and going into the 1950s and 60s, this is a look at another one of my grandpa's records. This is a original copy of Elvis's Golden Hits. This is a classic record. This is an awesome record. I'm Old Sugar. The Birth of the King of Rock and Roll, presenting Elvis Presley. Our transition into the 50s and 60s begins now with the rebirth of youth and culture in America. This portion of the video is dedicated to my grandparents on both my mom and dad's side. I do not find discussing emotionally heavy and difficult topics uplifting. It is emotionally draining. The 60s were not off to a great start. On Friday, November 22nd, 1963 in Dallas, Texas, the President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, was assassinated by Lee Harvey Oswald. This video is not a whitewashed account of history, so we do talk about all the good, the bad, and the ugly, and all the aspects, whether they be positive or negative. This is a look at the inside of my magazine that I have from 1963, and this is a look at what the world looked like as it existed back in 63. Once again, this portion of the video is dedicated to my grandparents on both mom and dad's side of the family. What you are seeing are some of the photographs and news clippings from after President Kennedy was assassinated of a country in mourning. A lot of people were incredibly saddened by the sudden loss of the president. Not only was the impact felt back home in the United States, but around the globe. In Paris and in France and in Italy, the Pope cried over the loss of the president. It says, "Never again," said the priest, "we will see his smiling face." This was my grandpa's original copy of Nat King Cole's The Christmas Song from 1967. I also got this from his house while we were cleaning it out after he passed. This is one of the classic American Christmas albums, and I love it. Let us not forget the Beatles' invasion of America when they debuted for the first time on The Ed Sullivan Show. As our time in the 1960s comes to a close, we go out on a high note, and America came together to watch the Apollo 11 moon landing on Sunday, July 20th, 1969. Let's begin to switch gears now and transition from the 60s into the 70s. This chapter begins when my mom's parents started dating in the early 1970s. At that time, on the music charts, John Denver was huge. One of my grandma's favorite songs was Kissin' Angel Good Morning by the late, great Charlie Pride. And when my grandpa went to go pick up my grandma for their first date, he had that song ready to play on the radio on 8-track. And this is a look at what that may have looked like. Okay, so it's not Charlie Pride on 8-track, but I listened to John Denver's greatest hits with my grandma all the time when I was a little kid, and it's just such a great album from start to finish. You got Rocky Mountain High, I'm Leaving on a Jet Plane, Poems, Prayers, and Promises. It's a phenomenal album. In 1975, the band Chicago releases their greatest hits. I will never forget the way I felt the first time I heard this album. The first time that I ever heard this album, it blew my mind. I mean, the first track, 25 or 6 to 4. Does anybody really know what time it is? Color My World, Just You and Me, Saturday in the Park, Feeling Stronger Every Day, Make Me Smile, Wishing You Were Here, Call on Me, I've Been Searching So Long, and Beginnings. Chicago kicks butt. On Thursday, August 16th of 1977, the music world is shaken to its core when Elvis Aaron Presley, the king of rock and roll, passed away at his Graceland home in Memphis, Tennessee. Elvis left behind all of his worldly possessions. He left behind an incredible legacy and career. But most importantly, above all, Lisa Marie, his only daughter, and his wife, Priscilla. As we continue to celebrate the 20th century, we now begin our transition from 1979 to 1989. In July of '79, Sony releases the very first portable personal music player. The Sony TPS L2 Walkman was small enough to fit into the pocket of a jacket or a pair of jeans in your pocket. The 1980s started out with another unnecessary death. On Monday, December 8th, 1980, ex-Beatle John Lennon was murdered by a lone gunman. John's friend, Elton John, wrote a beautiful song titled Empty Garden about how his friend's murder impacted him. Between the different generations, it often gets debated who has the best decade overall. What generation holds the title of being the greatest of all time? Is it the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, or the 2000s? Honestly, I think this is a loaded question, and to be completely honest, there is no right or wrong answer, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to a matter of opinion, but I say that all of them win. Each generation has their own legends. The 70s and 80s are no different. You have Ozzy, you have Def Leppard, you have Van Halen, you had USA for Africa, Purple Rain, Bon Jovi, you have Def Leppard, Poison, and so many more. If you were an adult or a young adolescent in the 80s, chances are you probably remember playing Trivial Pursuit with your family. This is my original copy. If you were a kid, on the other hand, in the 1980s, you probably remember playing on things like the Atari 2600. This here is probably one of the earliest handheld electronic video games created, but this is what it looked like. This is what my dad did to entertain himself back in the early 80s. And if we look to our right, we'll see Dad's original theatrical Empire Strikes Back cup. When I hear people my parents' age talk about the 80s and say that they were simpler times, I genuinely believe them when they say that. For as long as I've been researching the 80s, which has been like for the past 8 years, I mean, I basically live it, you know, it's like a time capsule. And you know, it's kind of funny that I mention living in a museum because my dad tells me all the time, he's like, all the stuff you have is, you know, was mine when I was your age, and now it's like a museum and it's kind of weird. One of my mom's favorite songs is titled Automatic, and I included it on the soundtrack for my channel last year. In the song, Miranda Lambert sings about how it seems like only yesterday she'd get a blank cassette and record the countdown because she couldn't buy it yet. Like this.
In Hollywood, this is Casey Kasem on American Top 40, counting down the biggest hits in the nation on our way to the #1 song in America. Number 31.
Man, there's nothing quite like recording off the radio onto a cassette. Like, it's just an experience like no other. I mean, I can't describe it to you. A common spot for kids and young adults and teenagers that like to pass the time used to be the video game arcade. Here, we can see an original 1982 Tron arcade cabinet. You just put your quarter in and you hit play. The Sony Betamax was among some of the very first home video components. If you take a minute to look at some of the things that I have set up here, this is what the very early 80s looked like, 1982-83 era. We've got Tron, we've got Kenny Loggins, High Adventure, we've got Survivor with Eye of the Tiger, and it's just great. In 1982-83, there was a oversaturation in the home video game market, and Atari, I will give them credit, they had a lot of great games, but E.T., the Extraterrestrial, is not one of them. This led to the death of the company and is regarded as one of the worst video games of all time. By the mid to late 80s, kids had moved on, and Nintendo was the hot property in the latter half of that decade. We got Hulk Hogan in WrestleMania, and then we got, ooh yeah, Macho Man Randy Savage snapping to a Slim Jim. Yeah. It would be an incredible understatement to say that the 80s were definitely a unique time that can never be replicated. Man, the 80s were so awesome. Here we got some of my mom's favorite toys. Here are some of the highlight albums of 1989. You got Tom Petty's Full Moon Fever. This is a classic album. You got one of my mom's personal favorites, Girl You Know It's True by Milli Vanilli. This is another one of my mom's favorites. This is Bad English, which she saw in concert. Here you have Warrant's 1989 album, Dirty Rotten, Filthy Stinkin' Rich. My mom also got to see Warrant in concert with the late and great Janie Lane. Love this album. Here we've got Skid Row's debut album from 1989. This album has hits like I Remember You, 18 in Life, and Youth Gone Wild. Here you have Tesla's album from 1989 called The Great Radio Controversy. This album has a great song my mom introduced me to called Love Song, and about finding your inner strength, and I love it. Here we have Richard Marx's 1989 album titled Repeat Offender. This is one of my mom's favorites as well, and has hits like Angelia and Right Here Waiting for You. And as we close out our celebration of the 1980s, I wanted to end it with this. This is Rod Stewart's 1989 album, Out of Order, with Forever Young on it. My grandpa's favorite song off of this album. We now transition to the 1990s. Oh, the 1990s. What a time to be alive. Not to romanticize any of these decades or any of the family members that I've talked about. We live in an imperfect world with imperfect people. We are simply just mortals doing the best that we can, but sometimes just simply putting our best foot forward and doing the best that we can is all we can do. No, the 90s were a great time to be alive. Here's a look at some of the music that my parents were listening to at the time, and here are some of the movies and etc. that they watched during this time. And before long, they got married, had yours truly, and Dad played football, Mom was a cheerleader. It was just great. I look forward to now going into the 2000s, but that's a video for another time. My life is really good. Casey Kasem said that you are only as good as the people you work for and the people you work with. And I love my life. I'll see you all in the next video. Take care and God bless.